So we were, of course, in Austria. This was the Styrian Grand Prix. And as you say there, Keith, it was Jorge Martin scored his second ever pole position after Quartararo had his lap time deleted. Now, we had the first race start, which saw Bagnaia take an early lead, actually, from the pole sitter. And then there was a bit of jostling in the back. A couple of laps went by. And then we had this quite huge, scary crash on the face of it, which brought out a red flag for the incident between Dani Pedrosa and Lorenzo Savadori at turn 3. Pedrosa was around 12th, I think. He fell on the exit at the hairpin, and then Savadori, blind, unsighted from way back, hit the KTM on its side. Luckily, Pedrosa unhurt. Savadori looked visibly injured and has sustained some injuries, but could have been, I think they said this on commentary, a lot worse. He was talking to the marshals, but then that huge fire that broke out caused by a ruptured fuel tank. Keith, I don't think I've seen anything quite that severe in recent MotoGP times in terms of the flames that were there.
Everything for you is recent, Harry, because you're young.
That is also true. But, you know, on the face of it, it was those flames wouldn't go out either for a good while.
Well, they don't, do they? I mean, it's you know, the fuel is flammable, and it's difficult if you haven't got kind of foam to squirt all over it. You know, when you're trying to deal with
Can we clip that up? Fuel is flammable. I like that.
Yeah. It comes with that little triangle on the box. And the fact is that the marshals at trackside have got plenty of fire extinguishers, but when you've got that amount of liquid early on in a race, you know, we are talking about a lot of fuel on board, and clearly it ruptured the tank fully, so the whole lot was, you know, gushing down the track, and it kind of burnt really gently. I thought, you know, once it's out in the atmosphere and it's already alight, you don't get that big woof effect, do you? Sucking the oxygen out of the air. It just spread itself down the track and leaked accordingly. And of course, every time they chased it down the track and put it out where the fire extinguisher was, it was so spread out, it just caught back alight again. I mean, the accident brought out all the trolls, the track trolls, as I like to call them. You know, everyone at the moment, a fair proportion, I think, of riders are a little bit up in arms about the Red Bull Ring. There are certain things about the Red Bull Ring, particularly in the wet, that they don't like. The place really is like glass when it rains. And you get those, you know, straight up front brake faceplant type crashes at the Red Bull Ring, which need to be looked at. There are a couple of blind exits on corners. Turn 1 is a good one. But Dani Pedrosa's crash, it's got nothing to do with the track. It just annoys the hell out of me when people use the platform to start castigating the track and the track owners. In that, you know, Pedrosa fell down. A rider that was in the back of the bunch was unsighted, as you say, Harry, quite rightly. And by the time the waves have parted and you've got a motorbike in front of you, the same thing happened out of turn 1, if you remember, going back to, was it Hafiz Styrian that had that with Bastianini's bike, I think, hit it amidships. Because the bike was laying in the track, by the time he saw it, because everyone else parted and went around it, and he's the next in line to hit it amidships. And the same thing happened here. You cannot blame the track for that. But there seems to be, you know, certain commentators that seem to be very keen to jump on this bandwagon of these tracks that aren't safe. You know, I don't go with that. I know, again, and you know, there will be the very same commentators that say, well, he's an old bloke, he's used to it back in the 80s and all the rest of it. Yeah, you're right. But I've got a good handle on what's going on with most racetracks. And yes, there are improvements always to be made. Turn 3 is a kind of corner that can cause problems. You're nearly 200 mile an hour approaching it on the left-hand side of the tyre when you want to make that braking manoeuvre. We saw what happened when Zarco tagged the back of a bike and we had that massive crash, you know, last time at turn 3. And I think that kind of crash where bikes can go across the corner and wipe out people that are turning the corner. You look round racetracks and see how many of them there are. A lot. You know, you're not going to go racing if you're going to rule all of that out everywhere. You make it as safe as you possibly can, of course you do. And the A1 ring, the Red Bull ring.
There's your age.
Formerly the A1 ring. Osterreich ring, if you want to go about that far as well. Yes, I think they do need to make some improvements, and I think they probably will have to by next year, because I think the Safety Commission on the Friday night will be pretty well briefed by riders about how unhappy they are that they haven't either straightened that corner out or done something with it to make it a little bit more safe. But it will happen, and they should have done something for this year. They didn't, and that, I think, what that tends to do is it winds the riders up. We're not being taken seriously. They're not taking our safety seriously. If it had rained heavily there today, we could have ended up with a Monday race day, because I think there would have been, like Silverstone, a rider strike. I hate the word strike. A rider protest of some kind. I think we may have ended up racing on a Monday, which they were prepped for. But thankfully, the rain stayed away and it didn't happen. Maybe next week.
Pete, well, maybe. But Pete, you spoke to a couple of the riders at post-race as well, and there were a couple that were, up in arms and did make their thoughts clear on the safety issues that they found. What did you hear from their riders themselves?
Generally, you have to say exactly as Keith said. Most of them said, look, that accident could happen at any track. You can't pin that as a specific, incident for the Red Bull Ring. More generally, a lot of the riders are concerned about turn 3. The walls are too close, etc. They did sort of put that sort of bit of a barrier, a bit of a kicker, if you like, on the end of the barrier to try and stop the bikes flying over, as we saw last year. It does sound like for next year that section will be changed in some way. I don't think we know exactly what they're going to do yet, but I'm not sure why it's taken this long, but it seems like it was always planned that it will be changed for next year. So that will be the main area of concern, hopefully sort of improved. In general, the complaints are really that some of the walls are too close, and that the track is not designed for bikes. That's another one. But by and large, apart from that turn 3 area, turn 1 maybe as well a bit, but it's certainly not. It's not. It's a Formula One homologated track. I mean, it's not unsafe. It's not. It's certainly not like the old version, if you like. Valentino Rossi actually was asked, "Do you think they should go back up the hill and over?" As Keith might know, and do the old version instead of going as they do now and not onto turn 3. And he said, "Well, it'd be great, but it'd be even more dangerous." So I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, that was sort of where Cal Crutch though is he doesn't like the track, especially in the wet. But even he said, "Look, Pedrosa's accident, it was just one of those things. It can happen anywhere where you've got." Where riders are unsighted because of the terrain, if you like. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that did cause that accident a 30-minute red flag, and then they did get going again, and Pedrosa was able to use the spare bike as well, but Savadori did not take any further part in that. They went back to their restart original grid positions, which helped some people, didn't help some others, and actually we'll just come on to what you alluded to earlier, that, especially for Maverick Vinales, it just went from bad to worse, didn't it, Keith? Didn't get off the line for the second restart, went to the pit lane, then there was a whole kerfuffle about, has he gone too far out of the pit entry, where's he supposed to go from? He went backwards a bit, no, he was fine, then he got going, he was last, and well, then the day's a bit of a write-off, wasn't it?
I think when we touch on the subject we do and say how close racing is, if you're starting from pit lane in a MotoGP race, you can be pretty sure that you're not going to be doing any good. You can minimise the problem and you might score a few points, but you're going to need to be absolutely... It was 27 laps compared with the 28 it was originally supposed to be, so you were going to be running out of tyres by the end of it anyway. He stalled it on the line effectively. They pulled him off to the side of the track. He had to go into pit lane, restarted, followed round behind the pace car. His place to start was going to be in pit lane. I mean, he got no choice. That was where it had to be. But you're right. I think there was a green light at the end of pit lane, and he rode through it, but realised that he shouldn't have ridden through it, and so rolled back down the hill backwards, back into a position, which was really good thinking by Maverick. But it ruined his race, and it was a great shame for Yamaha in that situation because that was done. And he was looking so good in those first 3 laps before the red flag. The reason, obviously, that they went to a full race distance in the same grid because they hadn't done three full laps. So therefore, they go back to the original grid positions and start from the original places, which allowed Dani Pedrosa, the cause of the accident, to restart. And it would have been Savadori if he hadn't been hurt or if he'd had the right bike available in the second bike ready and available. But Pedrosa, he was brilliant all week. Oh, okay, it's a Red Bull ring, it's a Red Bull track, it's a KTM, it's an Austrian racetrack. He probably knows it quite well. But the big question was, it's all very well doing a lot of mileage in testing. I think we touched on this subject in previous pods. You know, the fact of the matter is, it's cutthroat out there. You know, everyone is going to be right on it all of the time. And Dani wasn't race fit, that's for sure. He might be physically fit, but race fit is a completely different thing. I think he had a brilliant day. Top 10, I think, again, we said it last week, top 10 for either he or Crutchlow, particularly for Crutchlow, because he's been long out of it and hasn't done any mileage on the Yamaha. Let alone the old Yamaha that he was having to ride for this one, Morbidelli's bike. So Dani Pedrosa, great result for him, top 10 points. And he'll get better now. He's had that little extra ride, and when we get to next weekend, he'd be one of the ones I'd expect to improve.
And Pete, with that bike change as well, because he had to make a few changes because it was set up for the wet weather, wasn't it? The spare bike that he was lucky enough to be able to restart the race with.
That's right, Harry. Yeah, he was able to start the race, but they had to then rush because the clouds were looking pretty threatening. So everyone was ready, had their spare bike set up for the wet. So they then had to quickly change it to the dry. It sounds like even without that Dani preferred the original bike. That there was.
You always do.
Okay, yeah. So there was that as well, and so they were all in a bit of a rush. I think he might even have not even used the whole shot device for the second start, just because it was so frantic of, you know, get everything ready, right, get out there, off you go. As far as the cause of the accident, his accident in the first race, he wasn't sure what happened. He said he turned in, and then as he went to pick the bike up, it just stayed down, as he said, and it sort of spun around, and that was that. So he didn't really understand what had happened there. He was using the hard front tire. He said maybe that was an issue, but wasn't exactly sure why. He admitted he was pretty shocked by it all, as you can imagine, having been out of racing for 3 years, and that's your comeback. But as Keith said, to put all of that to one side on the spare bike and then still finish 10th. Okay, it was 11th, and then Bagnaia got a penalty after the race, but even so, and it wasn't a race where a lot of riders in front of him retired. We've seen a lot of retirements in Red Bull Ring races in the past. That didn't really only Jack Miller, actually, I think, was in front of him when he retired. So yeah, it was a great job. I mean, Dani said it was, he felt really welcome. He enjoyed being back. He was asked what he'd learned, and he said one of the things that stood out was that you really have to qualify well. He said, that's probably 50% of it now, and he said that's something that he never really liked. He liked to work on a bike for the race. But he said now you've got to always be doing quick laps, to get through to qualifying 2 directly, and et cetera, et cetera. So he said he didn't, but he thinks that's a really crucial part of it now. And looking at Brad Binder, his KTM colleague, who rode from whatever it was, about 16th to 4th. I mean, if Brad Binder could qualify well, he's got the speed to be up there, well, certainly on the podium, but probably winning races. But he's got to sort the qualifying.
Well, you said something twice in that conversation that made note of. I mean, whole shot device, qualifying well, difference it makes. Look at Suzuki. They use their holiday time pretty well. We talked about it before the holidays. The shapeshifter, the whole shot device, whatever the official name for it at Suzuki is, I don't know. And maybe, just maybe, having Davide Brivio back in the garage just encouraged them a little bit as well. Davide Brivio, obviously back off of his... he's just had a Formula One win with Esteban Ocon for the Alpine team. And there's the guy who won the MotoGP world title with Suzuki. He was associated with Valentino for a long time. Davide Brivio is a one of those godlike technicians, crew chiefs. And wanders down the paddock. Suzuki got their whole shot device working. Joan Mir, big thumbs up from both the boys. Mir used it to the best possible advantage. And here we have Suzuki. I'll tell you what, you didn't see that Suzuki did not look slack in a straight line, did it? They were getting off the corners with the Ducatis. So that the one and only thing that they could really do, because they hadn't got one and everyone else had, was manufacture that whole shot device. And Suzuki haven't wasted their 5 weeks, that's for sure.
No, both of them certainly doing better. But Alex Rins, I think, said he actually had some front brake issues. So if he didn't have them, then he might have been right up there as well with his teammate.
Yeah, I mean, the whole shot device, the impressive thing is that the other teams took a few races to kind of get it working properly. And yet this literally arrived, I think, because I asked Rins on Friday about the whole shot device and Mir, and they said, well, yeah, it's arriving now. So it came in a box to the track, and they fitted it on the bike Friday night, and then they used it Saturday morning, and immediately it was a benefit. I think there's obviously some fine tuning to do, but still... It worked well, literally out of the box. But on the other side of the coin, I mean, we're giving Suzuki a lot of credit quite rightly for that. Is it too late? They're the last manufacturer to do this. Mir is 51 points behind. If they'd have, they've had. Alex Rins was the first guy to spot that Ducati were lowering the rear of the bike on the straights when he was racing with Jack Miller at Sepang, I think 2019, and he was following him and he was seeing the back of the bike and he said, is the suspension broken? He couldn't understand it. He's seeing this bike moving on the straights, and he immediately told the team, "Look what they're up to." So they were the first to spot it, and they've ended up being the last to actually get it on the bike. And it's great that they've done such a good job with it, but you just think if they could have brought it for the start of the year, we're at round 10. Suzuki haven't won a race yet. It's clearly working. It's clearly making a difference, but Mia's got 51 points to try and make up.
Yeah, but Brivio said that, it is the first round that they've used it, and there's still a long way to go because it alters everything. It alters the electronics that's available to them. All the data that they've got for the A1 ring is, well, it's not null and void because it's always useful, but the fact is they've got to reapply their thinking. It's going to be very interesting to see where they are at the same track next week, because now they've got that full set of data. They will be poring over that information as to where that they can alter the electronics. It's not wheeling, it's pushing itself forward. There will be lots of things that they can alter now. The power delivery, how much power they can push out now safely without it, sticking it on its end or whatever it might be. So that shapeshifter is a major improvement. Everybody should be worried. The only thing that's going to really hold them back is if we have more cancellations of Grand Prix later on in the year. 9 rounds left. We've lost some of the major ones at the end of the year. It depends where we go and how it's going to work. I think that Suzuki, bearing in mind that we're on a Ducati track, they've won up until this weekend, 5 of the 6 previous MotoGP races there. Ducati have got, KTM, okay, they took it this weekend as well. But the fact is that Suzuki were there or thereabouts. They were not far away from a winning motorcycle. And I would say that must warn a lot of the, on a Ducati track, on a KTM track. Watch out.
And just a little, you reminded me then, Keith, when you were saying about that, because Rossi actually mentioned his starts. Now, Yamaha have had the opposite issue. They developed the rear ride height first, and then they've developed the front. Now, Rossi's been having problems with his starts since they've developed the front whole shot device, because exactly as Keith says, it's changed all the electronics. All of the settings for the start have had to be readjusted to cope with the bike being lower. And he said he didn't like it at the Saxon Ring, he didn't like it at Assen, he got bad starts there. He said it was a bit better today, but still, it's not working perfectly yet, his whole starting system, because of the change that they've made in having that system. So it does definitely mean that they have to do a lot more readjustment of the bikes.
Watch this space for next week. Suzuki are going to be right on it. And then when we get to Silverstone, we know what the Suzuki's like at Silverstone. If he's only pinching a few points here and there, 5 points here and there, it's going to take a lot to get the 51 back. But, luck has a lot to do with things at the moment. There's no one, again, standing out. Quartararo, okay, he's looked really good. And he's third place, brilliant. Damage limitation, a track that, perhaps is not the best for the Yamaha previously. But they're going to all be eyeing up what Suzuki are capable of.
And Keith, just to double check, what's this track called?
It could be the Oostenrijk Ring, Zeltweg, A1 Ring, or the Red Bull Ring. Take your pick. Right now, it's the Red Bull Ring.
Any one of them. One to watch for sure, and a notable mention as well for Brad Binder with a fantastic double overtake right at the end on Nakagami and Zarco to get 4th, which seemingly came out of nowhere. So a good result for him in what was a bit of a sort of struggle for KTM, sort of a struggling start to the weekend. They managed to salvage that. Pretty decent result as well. I'm going to move on to a third DNF in a row for Jack Miller, who was right up there, leading in a good battle with Jorge Martin, and then unfortunately into the gravel. Is that his title hopes over? You're still in with a chance, but is that it done?
It's never over till it's over. and Jack Miller will keep plugging away at it. I mean, it's unlucky when, that kind of crash. I couldn't see the detail as to why it might have happened in the way that happened, whether it was just offline, just a fraction. I haven't gone back over the tape, but at the end of it's one of them ones where you just shrug your shoulders and get on with it. It's, onwards and upwards for next year, for next week, or maybe next year, as you're trying to allude to. But I mean, we did, and I dare say the expectations were quite high with Jack Miller because of last year. I mean, he finished on the podium twice last year, didn't he, at the same track? You would have been expecting him to be at least podium this weekend. So dumping it has caused him a major problem. But the same thing can happen next week to some of the guys that are around him.
Yes, it's his third non-score of the year already. I think that's, and second in a row as well. So I think you could see he was, how frustrated he was with it because, as Keith said, it was a nothing fall, but it's got such big consequences in terms of his points again. What's the gap now? 72. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. He obviously can't afford any more mistakes. In a way, maybe it means now he just rides. Forget about the championship, just race by race. Different approach. Don't count the points, let's say, and maybe that will pay dividends in itself. Maybe he was putting a lot of pressure on himself to claw back points, and seeing a Ducati leading the race as well. Maybe wouldn't have helped us. In terms of settling, it would have made him think, well, the bike's winning, leading the race with a rookie, so maybe I can go quicker. But clearly he was over the limit that corner. He was trying to say with Quartararo, and obviously the Yamaha corner's a lot better than the Ducati. And, maybe that was, if there was a mistake, that was it, that he was just a bit quick there because he was trying to stay close to Quartararo in the twisty bits so that he could get by him on the other parts. But all credit to Quartararo to finish, as Keith says, to finish third, at this track against these much faster bikes. I mean, it was as good as a win, for him, really.
Well, tell you what, there were a couple of interesting guys that raced really well this weekend. I thought that, you got Alex Marquez, Takaki Nakagami that was looking quite good as well. Marc Marquez hit everything except the pace car during the course of the weekend, really. I mean, he obviously got something you quite like about Aleix Espargaro. Him and Aleix came together in that first. Yeah, the first turn, Aleix is justified in being slightly grumpy with Marc because that really was Marc just being forceful. But the second time, he got helped into Aleix Espargaro. Not that Aleix would have realised it at the time. He wouldn't have realised why Marc suddenly rammed him from the side. And someone had basically stuck it straight under Marc to put him into him as well. But really messy weekend for Marc Marquez, I thought, this weekend. I mean, he really is not back as Marc Marquez yet, is he? He's really not quite. He and his brother finished, I think, line astern, didn't they? Alex was right on it as well. But Honda was looking quite good in early pre-practice. I thought we were in for. I thought the Honda might actually be working this weekend, but slowly but surely it all fell away. It's quite interesting that Ducati were obviously working towards their race pace during the early sessions because they really weren't where I thought they would be, and the Honda were further up than I thought they would be. And then all of a sudden we got to the race, and it all kind of worked its way through, didn't it? And the Ducatis were looking very quick again. But Marc Marquez, apart from his aggression, which he's going to be getting, like he did back in the Moto3, Moto2 days, he's going to be getting his wrist wrapped soon. I can see a penalty coming Marc's way for some of these pushing and shovings. He might have got away with it when he was Mr. Superstar, but right now he's sort of midfield and banging and barging with his elbows out, and he's not going to endear himself to some of the riders around him if he carries on the way he's going, that's for sure.
It was, I mean, all action-packed, Pete, wasn't it?
It was, Harry, yeah. I mean, just on what Aleix's reaction to those sort of incidents were. He actually said, look, it's not Marc's fault. Marc rides how he rides. He said it's up to the stewards to sort of draw the line, if you like. And Aleix isn't happy generally that he feels that the stewards wait for an accident before they punish, and that they, rather than maybe put a halt to such behaviour, if you like, earlier, he thinks that, if no one falls off, you don't see any punishments. And his point is that, he was pushed back where I think he was 17th place after that contact, wasn't he? It pretty much ruined his race. And okay, he didn't fall off, but to be honest, if he'd have fallen off and remounted, he wouldn't have been much further back, would he? So that was sort of his gripe, if you like. It was that, the sport should kind of, even if riders are not on the floor, they should still say, look, that was beyond the limit. Now, there's always going to be contact in motorcycle racing. We wouldn't want to see penalties. Every time riders made contact, there was contact on the last lap of the Moto3 race. You wouldn't dream of punishing either rider for that. They were just doing hard racing. When the other rider does suffer to that extent, loses several seconds, drops all the way back, you can maybe see the argument for perhaps some sort of official warning. I don't know, where race direction or the stewards might say, look, if you do that again, even if the other rider doesn't fall, you're going to get a penalty. I don't know, but it's a difficult one, isn't it?
First corner bunching. At the end of the day, they're motorbike racers. I won't say rubbing is racing because we're not in cars, but the fact of the matter is there a fair bit of rubbing that goes on that. And it was a scruffy opening couple of laps, wasn't it? I mean, everybody was pushing and shoving. It's a bit like, well, they had 5 weeks off. All that adrenaline stored, ready to go. It was like sort of bang, let's have some of this. So you can kind of understand it in a lot of ways. I would be disappointed personally if, a bit of first corner bunching, particularly at that corner. We've had it so many times before, and there's loads of runoff. So everyone takes liberties with that first corner. They do run a little bit hotter into there. And of course, like every racetrack, the first time you arrive at turn 1 at that pace, in that gear, is when you do a start. There's no practice start along that front straight for practicing getting to that first corner. So your first time you brake for the first corner is the first time you brake for that corner from that starting position. So therefore is all a bit of sort of, anybody who takes it a little bit easy going into there is going to find themselves swamped by 4, 5, 6 motorbikes. So you have got to go in there almost a little bit too hot. Safety is an issue, but a bit of rubbing into turn 1 on the first lap or two, pretty normal really. Everybody's just settling down to it. But I don't know. Marc has a reputation. If you go back over the years, there's a lot of riders that used to get a bit of a telling off for being a little bit over zealous, should we say. And I mean, I've seen Marc Marquez take people's braking line, in other words, when moving in front of them, then immediately moving over to the line and moving them onto the white line or the rumble strips. Marc has had a few dirty tendencies in his aspiration to where he is now. He's a hugely fast motorcycle racer, but right now he's trying to bang a square peg in a round hole, whether that's physically or whether that's the Honda. But the combination of the two are not where they need to be to bring back Marc Marquez as previous before his crash.
A bit further on the Aprilia, of course, Savadori unfortunately has a fractured ankle and he's going to have surgery, so he will be out of this next weekend. One of the questions that Aleix was asked was, might we see Dovi alongside you next weekend? Now, imagine that. I don't think it's going to happen, but who knows? Anyway, officially, Savadori will not be riding, obviously. He's going to aim for Silverstone, but unfortunately, fractured ankle for him.
Lovely to see Dovi. A track like Red Bull Ring as well, when we've had such classic endings with Dovi there. But again, it'll be a bit like Cal Crutchlow. You can't bring a bloke back and dump him right in the midst of this melee as it is at the moment. And Dovi's too smart for that. And he doesn't have a contract with them anyway, so they can't force him. Don't have to.
I think you don't have to, do you? Right. For the first race, I think you don't have to. If Savadori was to miss a second race, I think you do. Then
they would. Okay, well, we'll keep abreast of all that action. Now, the one man we haven't really properly talked about is our race winner, Jorge Martin, who went on to not only take his first win, but as you said, Keith, right at the start, the first ever for a satellite Ducati rider as well, in only his 6th race, having missed 4 due to injury. So talk about a comeback from injury as well. It was a brilliant drive from him. We saw at the start of the season how fast he is. That huge injury that he got in Portimao, to come back from that as well with the help of the summer break. It really was a masterful drive from him, but it wasn't completely straightforward, especially with that red flag.